Hello and welcome to Business Flicks, CXO Business Flicks after I would say a couple of weeks gap. But yes, as we all know that we talk about technology, so we were picking up the right topics and the right people for you. So once again, as we in the past couple of shows and the discussions we discussed. Uh, Cloud computing in detail and quite in detail with perspective to what cloud computing is, and then how it relates to the local industry and the local Pakistan overall about its adoption as well. So continuing the same discussion about technologies, we have picked up this time one another top tier technology which has evolved over time, which is blockchain. So, as we say, blockchain for business is an invaluable tool for anyone ready to plunge, to take the plunge, and obviously start taking advantage of this remarkable technology. So, we also would like to know about what blockchain is, and it's so much talked about these days. So, starting with the topic, I have today Dr. Frank Lee Jr. Harper with us. And thank you so much, sir. Dr. Frank Lee is the President and Global Chief Governance, UBTS International. Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Over to you, sir, for a quick introduction so that all the viewers would also know you. And thank you, sir.
Greetings. Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to all of you around the world. As I was introduced, I am Dr. Frank Lee Harper Jr. I'm the President and Global Chief Governance Officer for United Broadcast and Technology Services based here in Atlanta, Georgia, in the USA. We are a global telecom infrastructure and digital platform think tank company. I'm also the Vice President of Academic Affairs and an Associate Professor for Cambridge Corporate University, which is an online university based in Lucerne, Switzerland. And I have the privilege and the honor of serving on the Global Advisory Board of Tech Pakistan.
Sir, can you hear me?
Okay, now I can. Before I couldn't hear you.
Yeah, okay, sir. I just wanted to ask, what is blockchain precisely? I mean, it has evolved. It was initially just a computer science term, which has evolved with the passage of time and has now called fifth evolution of computing. So, what was the inception? Started? What was the initial thing? What was the initial idea of having blockchain, and how it evolved into a technology which is now which can help us in many ways? So, over to you, sir.
Okay. That's a great question. First, let me start off by talking about the founder. Okay, his name is Satoshi Nakamoto. Okay, and no one has seen him, and they don't know whether it's one person or whether it's multiple people. Okay, but he is professed to be the developer of the Bitcoin. He authored the Bitcoin white paper. And also, he oriented the deployment of the Bitcoin reference implementation. He also has been claimed to be the first one to solve the double spending problem, okay, of digital currency using the P2P network. Now, with that, I also like to talk about the evolution of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency over the years. And I refer to Bitcoin as BC and I refer to cryptocurrency as CC. And to do that, I like to tell the story of the Chinese bamboo tree. Okay, and the Bitcoin and with BC and CC, the industry can be likened to that Chinese bamboo tree. So what happens is when a Chinese bamboo tree is planted, okay, there's expectation that from the community that it's going to grow into this humongous tree that is 90 feet tall. Okay, but what the community doesn't realize that it takes 5 years in order for a Chinese bamboo tree to grow to its maximum height of 90 feet tall. Okay, so what happens is you don't actually see the growth of that bamboo tree until after 5 years. Okay, and so what has to happen? So every day for 5 years, you have to water and you have to fertilize that seed. Okay, and there's nothing going to show. There's nothing going to show. But what's happening is underground, the root system is growing. The root system is growing. And then after 5 years, eventually a tiny leaf grows. A tiny leaf grows. But just think about the ridicule that the developer, let's suppose you are the planter, the ridicule that you undergo for 5 years of people are looking at you and you've got all this hype about, I'm growing this great big tree, it's going to be 90 feet tall. And so, and every day for 5 years, all they see that you're doing is watering and fertilizing basically the ground. Okay. And so, but what happens is this, after those 5 years, once that leaf grows, in 5 weeks, it grows to 90 feet. Okay, it grows to 90 feet. And so, in other words, in those 5 years, the development takes place underground. It takes place underground. And then after those 5 years, the growth becomes evident. So now let's look at the Bitcoin and the cryptocurrency. Okay. Advocates had high expectations, okay, and of becoming a great industry. But people began to ask, where are the Bitcoin projects? Where are they? And then coupled with the fact that most Bitcoins, their ICOs, 90% of them were scams. And then you begin to look at the fluctuation price. It's very volatile. So it became to be a turnoff. But what was really happening is that, again, going back to our analogy on the Chinese bamboo tree, is that underground, there was a whole lot of things taking place. In other words, I like to call it a transformation in 3 parts. Okay, there's the change, where there's a shift that is happening. There's the adoption, and then there's a leadership that has to create a culture that allows the change and the adoption to harmoniously exist. So let's talk about.
Would you also call it using the old technology in new ways?
Yes, exactly. And what happens is with that change, it starts with, you have your academic institutions. Okay, they are now molding blockchain professionals for the future. You have training companies that are training analysts and developers to meet the demand of future blockchain projects. You have business leaders and technology leaders that have to prepare to hire these blockchain professionals with all of their talent. Okay. And in addition to that, you have the government and business that are looking at various types of applications. Okay.
So
and then you have.
Would you also like to touch base upon the types of blockchain, the permissioned, the private, and the public blockchains, as within the answer of what you're telling us about blockchain?
Yes, exactly. And so as you're going through that, okay, within these institutions, they are looking at, okay, the different types of blockchains. So you have the private, you have the public blockchain. And so now you're looking at such things as Bitcoin, Litecoin, those kinds of things. Then you have a combination of the permissioned and also the private blockchain. okay, and that falls into with Ripple, okay, and then you also have sometimes it's called a federated but also consortium blockchain, okay, and so all of these are taking shape, and so you have this industry now is that you have organizations that are spurring up to support the adoption, because you're not going to have the adoption of blockchain unless you have organizations that are skilled in specific, that are focused on specific industries like asset management, finance, banking, okay, supply chain. Okay? And so those are the things that are happening, and even to the point now here in the U.S. Every January, blockchain professionals from around the globe converge at the United States Capitol, and they attend a forum called governance law, okay, and governance law and blockchain, okay, and so you have a lot of activity that is really getting to a point now, whereas blockchain is becoming that mainstream. Okay, so yes, it started back in 2008, but now 10 years, blockchain, as you mentioned earlier, is now mainstream. Okay. So now let me talk a little bit about again what is the blockchain. Okay, and so think of a blockchain as let's say a list of records. Okay, they're called blocks. Okay, and they're linked using cryptography. Okay, and each of those blocks, you have three things. You have a cryptography hash that points to a previous. You have a timestamp, and then you have transaction data. Okay. And so when you look at the blockchain, okay, it's really that technology that is behind the cryptocurrency, but there's also other uses for it. Okay. And so think of it as a solution of the age-old problem of trust. Okay. It provides you an architecture for so-called trustless trust. So what do I mean by that? Okay. It allows you to trust the output of a system without trusting the actors within the system. Okay, and so when you look at the overall blockchain, again, one of the benefits of it is that, as I mentioned earlier, is that it removes the middleman, no intermediaries. So just looking at the blockchain, you have a blockchain, it runs on the internet, it runs on peer-to-peer connected networks, computers that are on the network. Each one of those peer-to-peer computers has a copy of the ledger of transactions. Okay, and so the technology that's behind that is, again, we have cryptography, we have the peer-to-peer networks, and then we have game theory. So what I'd like you to do for me is, if you could share with the audience, that's about a 3-minute video that gives you a really brief overview on game theory.
I'll do that, sir. Just a second.
And so as the audience is listening to the video, think of the blockchain as a distributed database that means a continuous growing list of transactions of data. Okay, and again, the cryptography serves as the technology to prevent anyone from tampering with it or manipulating it.
All right, sir. Here we have the video.
System we designed so that anonymous nodes all over the world can work together for the common good of the network. Essentially, you want to design systems so that everyone acting in their own self-interest will help the network, not hurt it. This prisoner's dilemma is the classic example of game theory, so we'll run through it really quickly here to help clarify our statement. Alice and Bob are both caught at a crime scene and brought in for questioning. Under the law of this imaginary world, there are 4 possible outcomes here. Alice and Bob both confess, one or the other confesses, or neither confesses. Everyone's punishment length will vary depending on who does what. For example, if Bob confesses and Alice does not, then Alice gets to walk free and Bob takes the fall. If they both refuse to talk, they'll both go to jail for not cooperating. If they both confess, they'll get a lenient sentence for wrapping this whole thing up quickly. You can see all of the outcomes on this chart here. The worst outcome is highlighted in red, the one-sided outcomes in yellow, and the best outcome in green. Now, in a perfect world for Bob, he can stay silent and hope that Alice confesses. If that happens, he gets to walk free. But what if Alice also stays silent? Then they both get a fairly bad outcome. In this imaginary legal scenario, the law is designed to make confessing to your crimes the ideal outcome. It saves everyone time, and you get the most lenient sentence. Sure, you could roll the dice and stay silent, but the consequences could be dire. So the system is encouraging a specific outcome, an outcome that's good for the people operating on the side of the law. Let's translate this to blockchain. How does the Bitcoin network set up its system so that the best outcome for the individual is also the best outcome for Bitcoin? The most direct parallels we can see are in mining and block rewards. In the Bitcoin network, miners receive a Bitcoin reward for successfully compiling a block of transactions. All of the miners in the network are simultaneously trying to do the same thing. The key aspect here is that rewards are only recognized on the longest chain, meaning that if you somehow cheated your block and it invalidates one that follows, your rewards are gone. All that being said, let's start with the worst outcome. If everyone is cheating constantly, trying to throw together any old invalid block, then they're wasting their time. There will be no valid chain and no valid rewards. Everyone loses. On the exact opposite end of the spectrum, if everyone works honestly, everyone has an equal shot at the reward. Nobody wastes their efforts, and you're bound to see a fair share of the rewards. The edge cases here are when individuals try and cheat. If the majority of the network is honest, then you're simply improving your chance at the rewards while you're removing your own. Your reward comes to 0, and the rest of the network's improved. The Bitcoin network has created a system where any amount of cheating becomes a big waste of time. The only chance you have at getting a reward for your actions is if you work in the best interest of the network. Again, none of these concepts are particularly new. It's just that blockchains like Bitcoin have employed them in new ways. Game theory has successfully incentivized a network of thousands of nodes to work together despite not knowing each other at all.
And the key takeaway from that video is that last point, is that with game theory, it's incentivized thousands of miners all around the world to work together, okay, without even knowing each other.
Yeah.
Now I like to talk about how the technology stack behind all of this. Okay, and so with the technology stack, there's 4 layers. Okay, you have the user experience layer. Okay, and that has your smartphones, your desktop computers, those kinds of things there. Then you have the application layer. Okay, and we all know who writing applications basically dictate behavior. Okay, they dictate the behavior. Then we have the blockchain layer. Okay, and within that blockchain layer, we have a record of transactions, so we keep track of the movement of transactions. We also have the consensus rules. That is, if you're going to be part of this network, you have to behave a certain way. I like to call them rules of engagement. Okay, and then finally we have of course, the P2P network. Okay, that is, of all of these devices, they have to be identified within the network. Okay, so that's the blockchain layer. Then we have the final layer, the internet layer, and that's the TCP/IP protocols. Okay. Now I talk about that because it's as an introduction into another type of P2P type product. Okay, and that being smart contracts. And so think about smart contracts as you have a P2P network that is, first of all, it allows the terms of the agreement between the buyer and seller to be directly written in lines of code. Okay, and then within those lines of code, there are conditions that have been that are identified that when that condition is met, it automatically triggers a certain behavior. So that's really the essence behind smart contracts. Some examples of usage of smart contracts involve when you're sending money from point A to point B. Okay, or when you're registering property.
Yeah.
Okay. You can also use a smart contract for more complex transactions where you have a group of people that are working together for a common goal. Okay, and those are called decentralized autonomous organizations.
I see.
Now
Yeah.
we had talked earlier about the types of blockchains. Okay, and so I just like to add a little bit more, to that introduction. Okay, we established the fact that there are three types of blockchains. Okay, and I like to give some examples in terms of the usage of those. Okay, so I've already given an example on the public blockchain, that is with Bitcoin, Litecoin, and those kinds of transactions. Okay, then you have what's called the permission or private, in which the actors, whoever can involve with the transaction, is determined by the business owner. Okay, and so here are some sample activities within what I will call that private and permission blockchain. That is, who can access it. Okay, when you're broadcasting transaction, who can see it? Where are they going to go?
Yeah.
Okay, how about storage? Okay, where's the data going to be stored? Okay, and then execution. Okay, who has the permission to begin a process, stop, or retrieve a process, or restart a process? Okay, and again, each one of these, there's a there's also that consensus and mechanism that's involved, but in this case, there's a central authority. There's a central authority, usually a business owner, that makes the decisions to determine the answers to those four areas that I just talked about. Now, the final type of blockchain that I like to talk about is the consortium. Okay, and think of that as a hybrid, okay, between a public and a private. Okay, for example, IBM, their Hyperledger Fabric blockchain, it was used by Walmart. Okay, Walmart is a big department store here in the United States, and the way they use it is to be able to track food from its source to the actual shelf. And the benefit for using the blockchain in that manner is, let's suppose there were food recalls. They could access the blockchain to determine where the source of that food came from and where it was, which store it was in.
So if it was a batch recall or some other issue, they can utilize the data and information, as well as if there's some customer. I mean, it can be used in so many ways for tracking your customer as well. Yeah.
Yes. And then you take JP Morgan Bank. Okay, they're creating their own digital currency, and they're calling it their quorum. They're calling it their quorum blockchain. And so essentially, what happens? The purpose of that blockchain is to allow as many banks as possible that they deal with to transfer money. So again, what happens? It eliminates the middleman. So for example, if you're overseas and you want to transfer your money to JP Morgan Chase, you have to go through intermediaries. Okay, and so in that intermediary, there's all kinds of fraud and theft that can take place.
I see.
So with this quorum blockchain, okay, they establish the rules with so they're picking their partners, They all adhering to the same rules. Okay. And it's so therefore that's the private side of it, but also the public side is that you can trade, whether it's Bitcoin, whether it's Ripple, whatever the valid cryptocurrency is, can be traded. It's faster. And then also all of the benefits that I talked about earlier from using the blockchain.
I see. So as we say, there's a saying. I mean, blockchain for business is an invaluable tool for anyone who's ready to take the plunge and the benefits out of it, taking the right advantage out of this, I would say, remarkable technology. So yes, sir, taking the discussion forward, as we speak about applications, so it's something, it's like not industry specific, right? It applies to many industries, and you also touch base upon how it's used in supply chain. Does it also help us in adding some competitive edge to the company itself, in like how it works for the companies and the organizations to grow, to bring some growth to the top line, perhaps?
Well, that is a fantastic question, and yes, it does. Because just think about it, okay? When you look at the qualities of the blockchain, the fact that it's public, it's shared, okay, it's a ledger of transactions. Anyone can inspect those transactions, and there's no one that has control over it. So therefore, for example, in supply chain, let's say for the U.S. Postal Office, okay, they'll use blockchain in 4 of the major transactions within the supply chain. That is, through smart contracts. Okay, and so if you're delivering a package, you could design and develop a blockchain that once the receipt for that package has been secured by the receiver, then that kicks off a transaction for that person to get paid. Okay, it's within the blockchain, and so, but it makes it efficient, it's effective, it's accurate. Okay, and so when it's efficient, effective, and accurate, now you don't have to worry about going back and making reconciliations and all of those kinds of activities when you have the wrong data, the wrong transaction being processed. That costs time and money. So it makes the organization more efficient in terms of being with smart contracts. And then let's look at tracking packages. Someone can send me a package, and then I can get online and I can watch where that package is going. Okay, where it's being picked up, where it's delivered, how long it's there, okay, where its next stop is going to be, and eventually when I get it. And so again, the benefit is that you have that you're able to track, you have that transparency, okay? You have that integrity, you have that security. And as a result, that makes for a more effective and efficient operation as it relates to the tracking your packages. Let's take fraud.
Yeah.
Now, regardless of what I'm just talking about the U.S. Post Office, but Walmart. I've worked with Walmart. I've worked with Amazon. I've worked with PPL in Pakistan. I've lectured to a number of companies there in Pakistan. And here's the fundamental problem. Okay, the more complex your blockchain is, okay, it's very difficult to keep track of transactions. Unfortunately, that's an open invitation to fraud and theft. So again, you look at the benefits of the supply chain. It provides you that transparency and that tracking to make sure that everybody who is adhering to what's needed, what's called for by the operation, and they're being compliant. Everybody sees it. Nobody owns it. So as a result of that, just thinking about our example with tracking, you're able to watch products, okay,
Yeah.
as it goes through the supply chain. And today, I like to use the term as value chain, because with supply chain, you're just talking about you have an entity, and you have their customers, and then you have their suppliers. But in a value chain, in a globalized society, you not only have your supplier, but you also have your supplier's suppliers, and you have your customer. You have your customers' customers. So, for example, you take a company like Walmart. If you in the United States, if you go into a Walmart, you will never see any of their shelves that are not stocked.
Yes.
And the reason for that is they have a supply chain system, okay, that allows their vendors to actually manage their inventory.
Okay.
So it allows them to manage their inventory. Yes. Okay, so it allows them to manage their inventory so they can keep track of it. They can keep track of it. And then another example of using the blockchain is in transaction processing. So what you're doing is in the post office and most organizations is you're removing that manual process. I've always said, as a practicing industrial engineer, is once you can standardize a process, the next phase to improvement is to optimize it. And you optimize through streamlining, automation. So you have robotics automation, those kinds of technology, artificial intelligence.
Yeah.
And so blockchain is the fundamental technology to making all of that happen. So just think of it, the more you remove the element out of the transaction processing, okay, the less you're subjected to errors. So you don't have the rework, you have the efficiency, you have the effectiveness. And again, those that are quicker to market with the quality, with the appropriate price, are the ones that are winning in today's industry. And it doesn't matter where you are in the world.
So as you mentioned, it's like an example about supply chain managing inventories. Can you also touch base quickly upon if it works through AI or say ML somehow through in the production area, and can it also help us in the production area as well, production side of the industry?
Yes, and in fact, when you think about just any supply chain, okay, there is on the supplier side, you have to make the products. You have to make the product. So you've got a manufacturing component. I used to work for a renewable energy company. Okay. And what we did is we took non-food biomass, non-food biomass like wood, and we converted it into sugars. Because within wood, within the middle part of the wood, there's something called lignin, which is a sugar. Okay, which can be refined. Okay, it's a natural sugar which can be refined into a number of food products. But that factory was truly a state-of-the-art factory. Okay, we use programming, PLC. We use SCADA machines, that is supervisor control and data acquisition. And so what happens is you have data that is flowing through those systems, but the data now is using the blockchain. So now there's no manipulation, because see, here's the problem. Okay, in a traditional database, you can have hackers that go into the data and they can change things. Whereas with the blockchain, the only thing that you can do is you can create data and you can read it. For those of you who have been in the IT industry for a while, think of the term crudding the data. Okay, crudding the data, that is within your organization at a very strategic level, as you're creating an enterprise data model, you want to identify those processes, and also you want to identify all the data that's relevant, that's an asset to your organization. And at the intersection, you want to indicate whether that process creates the data, that process reads the data, that process updates the data, or that process deletes the data.
Yeah.
Well, in the blockchain world, there's only a create and there's a read, because no one can update it and no one can delete it. Why? Because we talked about cryptography. Cryptography, what does it do? Okay, it prevents you from tampering or revising the data.
Great. Yeah. So, and this is all covered under permission blockchain, the industry specific one. Where would we put this one? Place the which type of blockchain out of the 3-4 that we discussed? Which one is suitable for the specific industry, say production or supply chain, where we also need to ensure the privacy and the security of data as well?
Yes, yes. And so that depends on the organization. You still have to go through a process of having an enterprise data strategy. Okay, within that enterprise data strategy, you have to have the data governance, and then within the data governance, you're beginning to look at the organization, and you begin to identify, okay, if I'm dealing with cryptocurrency, then maybe we might want to have a public type of a blockchain. Okay. If I am looking at your auditing type functions, maybe I might want to use a combination of a private and permissioned blockchain. Okay, or if I'm looking at having a sort of a self-contained transaction where I just want to deal with certain strategic business partners. And then also I may want to have customers that also interface with the company. So you use a consortium, which gives you a hybrid. So the key takeaway there is that there's no one size that fits all. You still have to look at the needs of the business. Okay. And then if this is your first blockchain project, you definitely want to run a proof of concept, and I'm going to talk about that later on. But you definitely want to conduct a proof of concept, because you want to identify those things that are low hanging fruit so that you can have quick wins.
Sir, just continuing your thing, and definitely we need to know what are the how to start up and pick up what, as you said, the proof of concept thing, how to pick up the right thing, selection of the right technology, and what should be the best way, best practices rather.
Yes, yes. And so just to understand your question is, how do we pick up your best practices?
Yeah.
For doing those. Okay. Earlier in my talk, when I was talking about the history of blockchain, and I mentioned the adoption. Okay, and I talked about the institutions, training companies, and those kinds of things that are actually preparing those professionals. One of the things I also mentioned is I talked about professional blockchain organizations. I happen to belong to one, and I am certified by the Government Blockchain Association. And so what does that do? Okay, the Government Blockchain Association, it's a global organization. It has well over 15,000 members worldwide. And the beauty of it is that within that organization, they have specific user groups that working on specific problems. So, for example, you may have a user group that deals with your finance. Okay, finance use cases. You may have a user group that deals with healthcare, supply chain. Yes. So in order to adopt and learn these best practices, you need to align yourself with organizations, like with global organizations like the Government Blockchain Association.
I see. Very nice. Very nice. Sir, yeah, and as you said about the inventory and the trackability, as it adds quite a lot of value, I think it's quite a relevant thing for the pharma industry as well, as they also
Yes,
look. Yeah.
exactly. In fact, I worked for a couple of companies, and one of the benefits of teaching at Cambridge Corporate University is I have a chance to teach a number of senior managers that work for the top pharmaceutical companies in the world that are in that that are in Europe and those various areas. And I've worked for I've done work with Schlerling Plough. I've done work with Muriel Pharmaceutical. I've also done work with BioMarin, again, the biopharmaceuticals, and again, the fundamental technology there is again, using that blockchain again for the supply chain. Okay, because when you look at in the pharmaceutical industry, okay, it's really a long and lengthy process, right? In terms of bringing a new drug to the marketplace.
And
And
there are
so
certain for injectables, there are certain temperatures that they need to have ensure throughout the supply.
exactly, exactly. And so, and all of that in terms of looking at the various compounds. When I was again going back to that renewable energy company that I worked for, one of their problems that they had is that they would run their results because they're doing a lot of research and development. And when they got the results that they wanted, it was very difficult for them to duplicate it because they never documented it correctly.
So is it an expensive proposition to adopt blockchain, or what's your perspective on this? I mean, for sure, there's something that you look at feasibility analysis for sure, but in general, as we say, there are always pros and cons to everything. So cost and prices, that's one thing for industry perspective. When I speak about the cost perspective, like is it is it a cost-effective technology to adopt, or is it a costly technology to adopt? It has a cycle to get the return on investment. I mean, what's the perspective on this?
Okay. The blockchain technology, the adoption of the blockchain technology is no different than any other technology. Okay, there is a process that you must go through. Okay, and so again, yes, it's doing that whole feasibility, but it starts with number one, developing a proof of concept. Okay, because in that proof of concept, you're going to determine the technical feasibility of blockchain, the economic feasibility of blockchain, and the operational feasibility of blockchain. Because things are going to have to change within your organization. As I mentioned earlier, you're going to have to bring in blockchain type professionals. Okay, your senior executives, they have to be orientated in terms of what is blockchain, what does it do, how does it, what value does it bring to my organization. So you have to go through that proof of concept, and you have to look at the risk. You have to look at the risk, the technical risks that are associated with it. And so when you start thinking about looking at the technical risk, again, such things are, you have to look at security.
Yes, that's what I was about to ask. We have talked so many good things about blockchain. So let's also talk about the risks associated to it, like any other technology.
Exactly. Yes. And so when we talk about that, first of all, there's the old risk, okay, that is associated with blockchain. That is, hacking and theft, okay, as relates to money laundering regulations. Okay. There's also money laundering. Okay, that's another risk. Okay, illegal drug distribution. Okay, though you can't change the data. Okay, that doesn't mean that whoever's putting the data there, the data is misleading. As with anything in systems, garbage in, garbage out. That doesn't change with blockchain. The thing is that once you put it in there, okay, well, that is once you put the data in there, no one can change it.
Yeah.
Okay, so
All the effort to hamper the data would all that doesn't have any
yes,
impact.
yes, human trafficking. Okay, that's another risk. Okay, how about state-sponsored terrorism? Okay,
Yeah.
and then another one again, as I talked about it, fraud. Okay, and then you have those technical risks. Okay, as I mentioned, and the only way you're going to expose those technical risks is through a proof of concept. And so, technical risks fall into the category of security. Okay, that's a technical risk. Privacy, accessibility, scalability, interoperability. That is, can I connect to other systems? Which is a big challenge when you're looking at supply chain.
Yeah.
Because if especially a complex supply chain where you have n number of customers, n number of suppliers, n number of products, all kinds of different monetary transactions going backwards and forwards.
Yeah. So
Okay?
it's about
And then adoption.
scaling it up.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Adoption. And then the final one, then also sustainability. Okay, sustainability. And then also another risk is unmet expectations.
Yeah.
Yeah, hype versus reality. Remember what I talked about earlier regarding the Chinese bamboo tree.
Yeah.
Okay, and again, from a blockchain standpoint, again, with all this hype, where are the blockchains? Where are the blockchain projects?
Nobody knows. Yeah.
Okay, and then we looked at 90% of blockchain ICOs are scam. Come on, are you kidding me? And then you look at when you look at one day the Bitcoin is up $21,000, the next thing is down to $8,000.
Yes.
So again, so you've got to deal with that kind of risk. Okay, loss of investment. You've got to realize that one of the things that I talk about when you start looking at blockchain. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, there are three. It's a transformation, and there's three parts to the transformation. I mentioned the change where the shift happens. There's the adoption, and we've talked about the risk of the adoption, but also we talked about leadership. That is, leadership has to create a culture to allow the change and the adoption of harmonies to exist. Well, the CIO has to adopt what I would call a new digital mindset. And in adopting that new digital mindset, they have to have a startup mentality. And in having that startup mentality, one of the things that is you have to engage in experimentation. You have to be able to learn fast and fail fast. Okay. If you don't have that startup mentality, then when you have that, you're not going to take in consideration that what happens if this concept fails. So if you're the type of organization that looks at failure as something lost versus failure as something gained because I learned something, then you're not going to benefit like the first adopters, like an Amazon, like a Walmart. Okay, those kinds of companies there.
Right.
Okay, so you really have to look at it from that perspective.
Just since we have less than 10 minutes, just 9 minutes precisely left. So I just put a question here. As we see so much potential of blockchain can potentially be adopted by the industries, and the trend is going to come. So that is in the near future, or it's already there in the market, and it's becoming best practice as well. Do you also see a shift towards cryptocurrency overall? I mean, as we saw a hype in Bitcoin, and then so many Ethereum and Bash, and so many coming in, and then it's going down. So as you mentioned, sustainability. Do you see this cryptocurrency model as a sustainable model, and do you see a shift towards it in the future?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Okay, and here's why. Okay. When you look at the demand, let's take the U.S. dollar. Okay, there is a trillion over a I think it's a $20 trillion demand U.S. dollar. Okay, but the gold, there's not enough gold to support that, to give it the value. So as a result, worldwide, the dollar is weakening. Okay, the dollar is weakening. And then you look at countries, you look at countries, they are now starting to adopt cryptocurrency. You know, for as I mentioned, I mentioned, you know, China, they creating their own currency. I mentioned, you know, J.P. Morgan Chase with their Quorum Bitcoin. There again, they're creating their own currency. There are a number of countries throughout Africa that are creating their own currency. So it is here to stay. In fact, I just read a couple of days ago where Warren Buffett is starting to move some of his assets out of the traditional dollar into cryptocurrency.
I see. Okay, you're saying it's there to stay, and definitely there's a shift to come. So and you also see this coming in near future. It's not too far, as it has become. We have some awareness, as well as now it's becoming a requirement as well, right?
Oh yes, yes. I mean, another example is you have financial institutions that are filing for patents on Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's not a fad. It's not a hype. You know, it's here to stay. And it just like I remember years ago when Bill Gates was talking about taking, you know, a computer and putting it on every desk.
Yeah.
And people looked at him and said he was, you know, he was out of his mind. Look what happened.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, there's just, you know, I mean, look at Facebook. I mean, there are a number of companies that, and so we live in an age of disruption.
That's right.
You know, disruption, transformation. I mean, that is the age. Okay, it's no longer your business as usual. Okay, leaders are those that look to improve the status quo. If you're going to come in and you're just going to say, okay, we're going to stick to the way things are being done, then what's going to happen? Either you're going to go out of business, or someone is going to buy you, or you're going to lose business, which then you're going to go out of business.
Yeah.
And so let me just sort of summarize it when we talk about business.
Yeah.
Three
That's
types
what
of
I would
business.
like to quickly summarize, as we just have 4 minutes left. So I
There are three types of business. There's a Me Too business, there's a Me Better business, and there's a Me Only business. Okay, as it relates to blockchain, the Me Too and the Me Better will continue to deal with the status quo. The way you become a Me Better business or a Me Only business is that you begin to look at new technologies like the blockchain.
Perfect. Very nice. So we could not, due to shortage of time, we could not actually touch base upon how it can also help the evolving e-commerce industry as well. However, it was a very good discussion, very informative. Thank you so much once again, and we will try to keep you engaged, and we will call you, request you for another session. Thank you so much for all the insights, all the details, and we'll also request you to share with us the crux of the discussion as a summary for all of us to keep it as a ready reference in future. Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Have a nice day and good
Okay,
weekend.
thank you very much, and it's been an honor. Have a great day. Thank you.
You too, sir. Thanks.